Greetings everybody, welcome back to Moonlight Productions. Today, it's lucky number 13, Rhode Island, the last state of the original 13 colonies of the United States. It's also known as the Ocean State. The early days involved the indigenous tribes that roamed the area in BC. By the time the 16th century had begun, European explorers had arrived in the area as the indigenous tried to defend their homes. The tribes were swiftly taken off the face of the earth from an unknown disease contracted by the Europeans. In 1396, a religious man named Roger Williams from nearby Massachusetts Bay Colony was banished from Massachusetts for his belief in separation from church and state. The Narragansett welcomed Mr. Williams into future-day Providence. More colonies would follow, such as Newport, Portsmouth, and Warwick. More would come together in 1644, and the area of Rhode Island and Providence plantations would be eventually founded. Later, the area was in turmoil as part of King Philip's War. Providence was set ablaze for months. Although the conflict ended, Rhode Island recovered and had great benefits from the ports that helped in as an excellent level of trade. Later in 1776, Rhode Island was one of the most vocal opponents of Britain. After the Revolutionary War, Rhode Island and Providence Plantation were admitted into the Union on May 29, 1790. Although most recently in 2020, a ballot initiative had passed to remove the Providence Plantation, and now officially the state is just Rhode Island. Rhode Island is the smallest state in the nation, and unless DC becomes its own state, Rhode Island would continue to have the smallest state-sized population. The second smallest state in landmass, Delaware. Delaware's landmass is nearly twice as big as Rhode Island, and is 200 times smaller than Alaska. Only 1,034 square miles make up the land of Rhode Island. As for population, Rhode Island's 7th out of 50 when it comes to the population. Home to about 1.1 million Rhode Islanders, or about 0.33% of the population. The city of Providence makes up a good chunk of the state's population, so it's going to be a zero shocker that Providence is the state capital. Around 180,000 residents live in just the state capital, making Providence 24th out of the state capital populations. The suburbs outside of Providence will equate to pretty much the entire state, including areas outside of Massachusetts. Rhode Island isn't a horrible state, but it's also a state that isn't exactly known for population growth. The state has been relatively stagnant for population growth. With all that said, please join me as Moonlight Production presents the top 5 good and bad about Rhode Island. Number 5, it sucks to be a retiree. There is a brutal baggage of problems regarding being a retiree in Rhode Island. First of all, the healthcare in the state is about average nationwide. Although the state costs are higher than the national average regarding your healthcare prices. If anything, everything in Rhode Island is more expensive, but we'll get there later. Winter weather is also considered a major problem if you're looking to retire. New England in general is a mixed bag for great or not so great locations if you want to consider living in a particular state or city. But at least with some of them, it's near Canada and you can buy lower prescription drugs. So if you want to retire in New England, I'd recommend picking some of the other nearby states like Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Those places are closer to Canada and you can get some of those better prescriptions. Number 4, the population density. Like nearby cities and states, Rhode Island is a massive problem when it comes to residents being canned in like sardines. An estimated 1,074 people per square mile are living in Rhode Island. The only other state to have a higher population density is in New Jersey. It also gets terrible when you're discussing traffic in Rhode Island. Wallet Hub has analyzed all the states on different metrics from safety to congestion and traffic. Rhode Island has ranked 47th out of 50 in terms of good driving. Considering living somewhere else if you don't want to be in a horrific traffic scene. Number 3, the brutal winters. Just like the rest of New England and going down to New York and Pennsylvania, etc., Rhode Island can get brutally cold. This obviously can piggyback right off of the retirement problem for retirees. Being in that cold weather can just make your life feel miserable. Although, to play some devil's advocate, the summers are moderate. It gets relatively modest at about 80 degrees plus or minus 5. So overall, it's a suitable place for the weather. You just have to deal with the cold conditions. I hope you have a high amount of money to heat your home, which brings us to Number 2, the high cost of living, high taxes, and high cost of essentials. The high cost of living is familiar to those who live in New England. Massachusetts ranked higher than California in the cost of living index for 2022. So that's just an example of New England being brutally your wallet. Rhode Island isn't as bad as Massachusetts, but Rhode Island isn't a slouch. Combining all of your essentials for your cost of living makes Rhode Island costs jumped up to 13% higher than the national average. It's also a state that kicks you in the teeth when it comes to your taxes, paying over $3,500 a year on your average home, 6% on your income tax, 7% on your sales. Not the worst, but still mean. So it's kind of bizarre when I'm looking at other sources, because if you have $100 in Rhode Island, the actual value is about $101.42. Although most states have a naturally higher pedicure value, so to be honest, Rhode Island is the best of the worst. Number 1, your infrastructure sucks. For being such a tiny state, Rhode Island has some massive issues when it comes to good transit. Rhode Island is considered the worst in the nation. Commute times are 27th in the nation, public usage is 20th in the country, road quality is 50th in the nation, bridge quality is 50th, so when it comes to your decay in your home, you should retreat, especially since your taxes aren't low enough to justify the bad quality. Number 5, it's a seafood lover's paradise. Not only is Rhode Island a small state, but 14% of the state's land ownership is the water that enters the state through the Atlantic Ocean. The early colonial days of Rhode Island carried on by fishing, so it's going to be a zero shocker that you should expect to see an elaborate and delightful fish market in the state. Prices are low and the quality is higher since it's more caught-to-table fish. Number 4, there are plenty of things to do in Rhode Island. Rhode Island, or Providence mainly, is a phenomenal nightlife. The Firewater River, the truckloads of different history museums, and the various locations you can visit for children, arts museums, the performing arts centers, and multiple things that you can do as a family is very elaborate in the state of Rhode Island. You should consider spending a trip, or if you just live in the area, enjoy it. It's considered very high quality. Number 3, the schools are great. New England is well known for when it comes to the education, so this is a no shocker that Rhode Island would be on the good side of education. Although Rhode Island is frequently described as the worst of New England, the state is moderate to good. According to Intelligent, the academic performance rank is 30th, the safety score is number 1 in the nation, the community is 12th, and the academic investment is in 18th. Combining all those numbers into a big blender gives Rhode Island being the 14th best in the nation. Overall, very solid. There is better neighboring states where you can get education, but Rhode Island, you can't give it a slouch. Give it a try. Number 2, it's a beautiful state with a great coastline. If you love living near the water, you are more likely to live near this state than most neighboring states. There are around 385 miles of coastline. Considering how tiny Rhode Island is, nearly half of the state is coastline. Most of the population is in Providence, so if you want something quieter, consider being in southwest of Rhode Island where you have the ocean near on the water. Although the rest of the state is relatively flat, some hills are flat compared to neighboring states. If you want to see more mountains, consider going to Vermont or Maine and visiting states that step it into Appalachia. And the number 1 best thing about Rhode Island is the diversity culture. Rhode Island is different from, say, California or Texas, where it's a minority-majority state. However, Rhode Island does have a good mixture of different cultures and lifestyles. According to the 2020 census report, Rhode Island's African-American population is about 9%, the Hispanic population is 17%, and the Asian population is over 3%. About 70% of the state is white alone. As for the LGBTQ community, a 2019 Gallup poll puts Rhode Island as high as most states. Around 4.5% of the Rhode Island population, those are 18 years old or higher, they're part of the LGBT community. Also, the entire state has all kinds of protections for the LGBT community. So if you're interested in having a more diversity-filled life, you might not go wrong with living in Rhode Island. So that's it. Those are the top 5 good and bad about living in the ocean state, Rhode Island. I've been trying to keep myself more up to date on all my current videos. I work a full-time job and a part-time job to go with it. Being able to make new content is being a little bit exhausting, as by the time I get home, I am mentally exhausted and ready to go to bed. So it really helps if you could be able to hit that like button down below and subscribe to Moonlight Productions if you haven't already. It seriously gives me the confidence to keep venturing out and keep pushing myself as a person. Thank you so much for your time and take care of yourself. Bye.